You've probably clicked on this video because you're considering getting a Doberman, whether it's a European or American line, and you're thinking, what are they actually like to live with? And here at Foreign Dobermans, we're going to try to break it down a little bit and get into the nuances of the breed. What your Doberman turns out to be is a mixture of genetics and early socialization, and that's how you see how the puppies will turn out. And a good indicator of what you're really getting is to have a look at the pedigrees of sire and the dam of the litter, and this will give you a little bit of a background of what they might be like as adults. So you've brought your puppy home, you've researched the pedigrees, you've looked at the mum and dad, and you've looked at some of the heritage that these dogs have and carry, and now you've got a puppy on your hands. We'll make a separate video on how to socialize your Doberman properly, but for the sake of this video, just so we can get into some of the characteristics of these dogs, uh, we'll talk about one of our foundation bitches who's known as Mako. As you can see, that's Mako in the video, and she shows a lot of the traits that you typically will see in a Doberman. As you can see here in this video, she's very affectionate, very switched on, has high energy, and just wants to interact. This is something that you will see from very early on, and typically you will see that they will have a person that they naturally just bond with, and they will favor that person. That doesn't mean that they won't bond with anyone else. It just means that, like humans, they just have their favorites, and how they decide that, I'm not sure. But generally, if you spend time and give them an outlet for their energy, you will find that they will tend to have an inclination towards you and want to be with you, uh, just as obviously anything else. One of the main things that you need to look out for, though, is separation anxiety. And what separation anxiety is that the dog can't really function without you there. It's so highly dependent on you and interacting with you that as soon as you leave or you're not there, the dog just either shuts down physically or mentally. And this is easily preventable at the beginning by setting clear and firm boundaries and allowing the dog, especially a puppy, to have free time on its own. I know when you get a puppy, you're excited, you want to take it everywhere, you want to put it in your bed, you want to sleep with it next to you, and you want to, every time it cries, just give it some attention and love. And that's a natural thing to want to do. But generally, you need to be very careful with how much time you spend with the puppy. You need to make sure that it has time to spend on its own and that it is allowed to cry essentially and figure things out on its own. Uh, that will allow it to develop and actually understand that, hey, I can survive, I don't need to have my human with me 24/7 because generally life does get in the way. People go to work, you want to go visit friends and family, and you don't want to come back and the dog is completely destroyed basically everything in the house, and it's done a protest wee or poo, and it's just gone completely off the rails, which is, you may hear certain stories like that, but as I mentioned earlier in the video, a lot of socialization early on and doing the right things will prevent those things. And another thing that many people talk about with Dobermans is how are they like with families and kids? Well, if you haven't already seen from this video, they can be a bit much for kids. Not necessarily that they will hurt them, but sometimes they just exhibit a really high energy and they just have these bursts where they just run around or, you know, just jump around and do some things that are just people, refer to them as zoomies. I don't know if you can call it zoomies, but they just have these moments where they just want to just expend some energy. And if you've got kids around and they're small, they might knock them over or bump them, but that's as much as they'll do. They're very affectionate, they're very socially intelligent animals, and they understand the concept of kids, but at the end of the day, you have to remember that they're dogs, and sometimes they might just have too much energy, or they might play rough, and they might hurt a young kid. So whenever there's kids around, definitely just monitor dogs, just every dog in general, not just Dobermans. You need to obviously be responsible and watch and supervise the play. Another common question or things that people tend to have about the Dobermans is, are they lap dogs? And the short answer to that is yes, they are. Generally, they'll be jumping on you, clinging on you, and after a nice day of running around or exercises, they pretty much want to be on you all the time. And depending if you like that or not, will depend on how you allow the dog to exhibit those behaviors. If you know early on you see that the dog tends to do that and you don't want to get hurt later on, you can encourage them to find their own bed and reward them and give them affection in that manner. So as I keep repeating, the dog you end up with really depends on how you raise the dog and what you allow it to get away with when it's younger. And another thing that we can talk about with Dobermans is, are they naturally protective? And that entirely depends on what sort of genetics these dogs have. Genetics is very, very important. If you're looking for something as a personal protection dog, then you need to get dogs from a line that have done personal protection. You can't just go get a conformation heavy uh, puppy and then expect it to attack every bad guy it sees and do all these things. That's just not how things work. If you want a dog for that purpose, you have to see that the dog and the pedigree and the previous dogs in that line have done some type of work. And what you have to understand though is there's a balance. So there's something that typically you'll see in German Shepherd lines where it's working lines and show lines, and it's not as heavy in Dobermans, but there is conformation lines and there is working lines. So both of them have their advantages and disadvantages depending on what you get. If you get a working line, you might find that they might be a little bit socially aggressive, a little bit more dominant, a little bit more, uh, let's say, strong-willed. They're not as easy to handle or train, especially if they have their mind set on something, or if they see something they want and you're preventing them from getting it. Some of these lines may be prone to handler aggression, just because they are, as I mentioned, very sensitive. But it's just all a balance. So if you get the right dog from the right breeder, you'll find that well balanced and exceed at multiple things, just as the original breeder of the Doberman, Louis Doberman, obviously the dogs were named after him. That's what he had envisioned for the dog. Dog that he can take with him when he collects taxes, dog that he can rely on to watch his back, and that's what the dog is essentially was meant to do. It wasn't meant to be a prey monster that wants to kill everything that it sees, but it also wasn't meant to be a couch potato that just sits at home and watches TV all day. When we say Dobermans need exercise, that's also a combination of physical and mental exercise. They need mental stimulation just as much as physical stimulation. So that's also another key thing to consider. If you found this interesting and you want to learn more, please feel free to like and subscribe. We'll make more content based around the Dobermans and the dogs that we breed around here at Foreign Dobermans. If you want to research and have a look at our breeding program, you can find us on foreigndobermans.com.au. And thank you for tuning in.